All right, everyone, it's time for some thoughts about Trump's tax plan. Of course, there's a little bit of a snag the other day, actually, because it turned out that, some part of the bill broke the Senate's rules. So they're like, oh, well, we have to send it back to the House again. They have to re-vote. And it passed. It'll pass just fine, most people expect. In fact, it may have already passed while I'm making this video or while it's processing. So don't sue me if that's the case. And if in the 1 in a million chance it doesn't pass, like some senator has a bitch fit or something, it'd be so funny. That would change the dynamic completely and actually make Congress look terrible. But here's the thing. Trump's tax plan, as far as I can tell, looking at it, and even write-ups about it, even the legacy media, which clearly, Business Insider isn't exactly a pro-Trump outlet. This is really going to buoy his support with people in the lower and working class. Not so much the upper middle class. Like, I was looking again at people in my bracket, and the expectation is that the tax rate, now other than the deduction increasing, there's not really a reduction in your taxes. So you'd save money, but it would be certainly less as a proportion of your income than somebody who's making like 30, 40,000 a year. Somebody who's in that middle class, lower middle class to working class, basically 20K to 50K a year. That's where the bulk, as far as a proportion of what the people are already paying in taxes, it's where the bulk of the savings goes. They're sitting there ranting. I saw on Being Liberal, it's like a few days ago, they were like, oh, this is going to increase taxes on the poor. Then they had to come out and say, oh, according to 2025 projections. That is, you're not even fucking certain. You're talking about something that's far in the future, almost, it's more than half a decade from now. You're expecting the possibility based on your expectation of debt and growth in the economy and whether this does or does not create any middle-class jobs. You're expecting that taxes will at that point begin to creep upwards for these groups of people, but you don't know that. You don't know it at all. That's just it's just like your opinion, man. It's a projection, and projections often aren't accurate. Krugman, who's making these whack-ass projections every other day now. Oh, the Trump tax plan will be terrible for the middle class. Oh, the debt will soar. Jobs will be destroyed. It will pop multiple bubbles and we'll end up in a depression. Well, that's funny. You said we'd end up in a Great Recession-style situation within a year of Trump being elected because he'd be bad for the economy. Like, stocks would start sliding down, jobs would be hemorrhaged, we'd start losing bunches of jobs again. It'd be basically like 2007 all over again. Didn't happen. Doesn't seem to have happened. Now I think the Dow Jones doing just fine. Now that's not Main Street, it's Wall Street, but some of that wealth does impact the general economy as a whole. You and I, the average citizens. But I was looking, and for people in the upper middle class, I don't expect that this is going to affect their persuasion, their political ideology much. But for people in the working class, and this is your fucking Rust Belt, this is the out of working class people that used to be in the lower middle class or the middle class, like union families, people who are on harder times than they can get by but not really. That's where the bulk of the increase in support is going to come in. This probably secures Michigan and Wisconsin for him, and Pennsylvania too in the next election. That's what it probably does, which is probably the point. It's why ultimately it's peanuts, because under Obama, and indeed under Bush, the middle class in this country went into steep decline, and a lot of people dropped out of the middle class. Middle and lower middle class, they became like poor. And a handful of them did very well and rose up. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars now. Despite the fact that this is a small number of people relative to the entire population, which doesn't cost a lot to give them a substantial break, I mean, ultimately you're talking about a tiny proportion of the actual tax revenue. Disproportionately, those are the people that Trump really needs to wine and dine. We're talking several million people who could make or break the next election for him. If he gets them on board, I think he does, especially with growth now well above, what a lot of his critics thought it could ever possibly be. They're like, 3% growth will never happen again. Well, I think it's slightly above that. I think it's moving up towards 4% now, if I remember correctly. That gives him the next election. It's the money, stupid. How are you supposed to formulate a defense? You can't run on a money platform. You're not going to be able to say, oh, the economy's shitty. All Trump has to do now is not start another war, and he's probably fine. This could really screw with the Democrats. Now, that's just a rough prediction. We also have to wait until the midterms. You can't make any binding prediction until then, but this moves the metric in my mind, the likelihood of Trump persisting and doing well and his approval rising just rose dramatically when this tax plan goes through. As far as me, somebody in my bracket, it's not that big a savings, but it is a tax reduction. And as far as the debt, another thing I can tell you, the Democrats suddenly will care about the debt again. You know, for all of Obama's presidency, they said, well, you know, before, when he was running, he's like, oh, the debt's a big problem. This is irresponsible and reckless. And then he forgot all about it, and it was an issue for a couple of years. Tea Party takes hold. They keep talking about it a little. They realize that nobody gives a fuck because nobody can understand the difference between debt and deficit. The average citizen doesn't even know the difference. So they just stopped talking about it, and they didn't care. I happen to agree with candidate Obama and candidate Trump that it's a problem. But I also don't expect that Trump's going to tackle it, and I don't expect it's going to be a major issue. If the Democrats try to run on, oh, we're going to decrease debt spending, you know what Trump will say? Why didn't you do that for the 8 years Obama was president? If it's such a big fucking deal, why didn't you do something about it? The Democrats will counter with, oh, but you said you would erase the debt when you ran, and he'll say, yeah, who cares? You know, unforeseen stuff. And the average citizen, you know, they don't know anything about the unforeseen stuff he'll be referring to, so they're not going to care. But they will care that they're paying less in taxes, and that maybe some of the local businesses came back. They're going to care when those small businesses that now have to pay a significantly lowered business tax, oh, yo, the small business owners are going to be on board with Trump so hardcore. They're going to suck him off so hard. All that has to happen is we don't have an economic collapse at this point, and money-wise, he's already secured one of the big things that people elected him for in the Rust Belt, the most competitive part of the country, will be secured. That throws him, the Rust Belt, almost certainly will have years of growth and recovery in areas that were largely overlooked. See, look, Obama's tax reform, so-called, his mild increase, allowed, like, the coastal regions, areas that were already doing better anyway, to thrive, honestly, to do well. But that's not the issue here. The issue here is small-town flyover America and the Rust Belt that's been degraded for decades. Those are the competitive areas. Oh, that plays so well to Trump's strengths. It plays so well to him. An area that's been loyally Democratic for, you know, a couple decades. Unions and middle class and stuff. And they got no relief. And after the recession, Obama gave them no relief either. They hate Obama. Obama's popularity is really, really low in a lot of those places. These are places that would be naturally Democratic strongholds, Democratic middle-class, you know, white suburban strongholds that have gone now fairly far red. And they're probably going to stay that way for a while if Trump does halfway decent job on the economy. As it is now, mild tax relief plus mildly inclined growth and mild job recovery in those areas probably gives him control of the Rust Belt. He doesn't have to worry about, you think that the Democrats can make up the kind of deficit they had there without massively higher turnout? The problem is, the Democrats then, here's the secret, to compete with him on turnout alone, they would need to have a candidate that was fairly stellar. They don't have one right now. They have Bernie Sanders is the most popular Democrat without being a Democrat. That's going to be a problem for them come the midterms. It's going to be a problem in 2020, I think, too. There's their problem. Now, this is speculative, of course. It could be that the economy drops out from under us. We have a student loan bubble and, you know, a housing bubble again, and we get basically Great Depression 2.0. It's a possibility. And I'm sure that there are people in government, the so-called economic scientists, which really it's just you know, basically modern-day shamanism when you think about it, modern-day witchery. It's voodoo practice. It's like going to the voodoo doctor to get cured from cancer. Basically, if you're listening to somebody like Krugman. He doesn't know what he's talking about most of the time. Couches is bullshit and big-sounding words that nobody knows quite what they mean, so they can mean anything, so it must be accurate, basically. It's basically how these people do it. If economists were really good, if it were really a science, you'd think they could have figured out by now what we should do in order to prevent economic downturns. Oh, that's right, we should have an actual free market, not intervene in everything. That's something that they don't want to do because they have to justify their fucking paychecks. You know, if you just had a free market, they wouldn't need to have jobs. You wouldn't need anyone to tell you anything because you'd never have a significant enough downturn outside of one or two commodities at a time, and things would generally grow and grow and grow for the next 100 years, and then you can worry about the problems of limited growth. Now, it's funny. Trump's tax plan is a preliminary guess, I say. probably helps the Republicans greatly. It protects them in the midterms to some extent. Now, probably make sure that they maintain the Senate, although they're not going to make huge gains in the midterms, I don't think. The Republicans will break even. That, by the way, that's a mild loss for the Democrats. They're telling people, oh, we can take back the House, we can take back the Senate. So when they don't do that, it's going to be a disappointment, basically. That's the problem. And then, again, turnout matters. What better way to invigorate your core fans, if you're Trump, than to throw them a bunch of money? What better way to do that, especially when it's disproportionately giving to the lower and middle classes? The Democrats, being liberal, now has entered the third stage. They were in denial. Now they're like, oh yeah, it will bring tax relief to the poor, but look, it's only a small amount. But the thing is, they make a lot less money. As a proportion of what they're already paying, it's a significant total. Saying, oh, it's only a savings of, like, this family only saved $1,500 this year, but this rich family saved $6,000. The rich family pays a lot more in taxes. By the way, you got basically the biggest thing that the Democrats wanted, they got. Leave the bracketing system alone. He's just reducing it now within bracket. By the way, that's a good thing. That was one of the things that could have been, for people on the cusp of that top bracket, it could have been a problem. People specifically making about the same amount that I make. It could have been problematic if he had reduced the brackets. He chose not to do that, and I think that in the end, they're actually raising the deduction a little further for people in the lower brackets. That's good too. Yeah, we do need tax. Look, the principle is that everyone pays too much. It shouldn't be class warfare of, oh, the rich need to pay more so the poor pay less. No, it should be everyone pays less. Axe some government programs. Get rid of some bureaucracy. Reduce the pork barrel bullshit. Reform the way the military gives grants and contracts out. It's problem solved. No additional debt. By the way, as the debt rises, Trump will probably call for that. He'll say, look, we can take care of this. You know, the Democrats, folks, want to raise your taxes to take care of the deficit. I disagree. I don't want you to pay more. I want government to use less of your money. Here's my plan. That's a winner. The Republicans can win on economic issues. They just haven't realized it because they haven't had an actual fiscal conservative as their candidate in about, since the Reagan era. Therein lies the problem. You ended up with a bunch of Bushes and the Mitt Romneys and the John McCains. They're not fiscal conservatives. They're big spenders, especially when it comes to the military. Yeah, they're basically bleeding heart liberals, according to the standards that you would have used back in the early 1990s. You just stopped using that term because you got afraid. You thought people would think you were immoral for wanting to reduce government spending instead of raising taxes on those evil, mean, rich people. It doesn't make sense. Now, okay, hedge fund manager protections aside, generally, I'm looking at the tax plan and it's a winner. Business Insider does a write-up. They're like, oh yeah, basically, here's the savings for people in these, 6 sort of situations, from someone who's poor, they're making, barely $20K a year for this family. There's someone who works in a power plant, they're making like $75K, they're doing pretty well. They're all saving money. It gives them all a tax break. For those on the lower end, it's even larger. As a proportion of the income they're paying, the tax break is substantial. We're talking about a reduction in some cases. I think it was 30% reduction for people who are poor. Why would they want to vote for the fucking Democrats? My goodness. Makes no sense. The Democrats will try to cast this as, oh, this helps the rich. All you have to understand is the difference between absolute numbers and ratios to see why that's totally fucking wrong. Now, that can be a problem. It's just like debt and deficit. People don't understand that either. Debt is the total amount that you're in the red. Deficit is the continuing rolling over amount over X number of days or years or whatever that you're adding to the debt. It's the deficit's different. It's not the sum total. It's how much more debt you have over a period of time, however you're choosing to measure it. There's your deficit. And yeah, this will raise the deficit, but in the end, most people won't care. If I'm making $50K a year, paying however much in taxes, Trump says, oh, here's your Christmas bonus of an extra $3 fucking grand you don't have to give to the government. You think I care about government debt? Look, this probably helps me with my debt. My consumer confidence goes up. I pump it back into the economy. Probably I spend some of that money. Maybe I save some. Maybe save up, buy a house. Maybe it helps to deflate the housing bubble. People who, they bought something a little bit too high up for them. Maybe now they can make ends meet. They can make those payments. It staves off, the inevitable bubble popping for another 10, 20 years. This would be great for the economy. It's good for us to have tax breaks. We need to reduce spending. We got so much shitty spend. Look, It's just like people who trust the government to censor harmful opinions. It's the most stupid thing you can do. Oh, I trust the government to tell me what is acceptable to say. I trust the government to tell me, it's like the gay marriage debate or abortion. I trust the government to tell me what's moral, what's right and wrong. It's terrible. Oh, I trust the government to manage my money. Are you nuts? Have you seen how they manage money in DC? They're the worst money managers in the world. You'd be better off privatizing the entire economic situation, letting private companies handle all that stuff. Cut the government out of finances entirely. You'd be better off letting an oligarchic group of corporations manage our money as a country, oddly enough. It'd probably to spend less, probably be more popular in the end. That's the really, really whacked out thing. You know, we need to constrain our spending. Not ask middle America to pay more. You know, the Democrats will make a big stink. So, oh, don't worry, we just want to tax the rich more. You know, their idea of rich includes basically the entire middle class. Because to them, unless you're miserably poor, it's bad. You're privileged and evil and wrong. That's one of the main problems. That and the fact that the Democrats apparently hate anybody who has light-colored skin has become the bane of their existence. Oh yeah, and the corporate cash doesn't help. We're going to tax the rich while we become the corporate party. We're going to tax the rich while we become the party of billionaire bankers. That makes a lot of sense. Where the really rich Republicans like the Bush family and the Romneys, really, they like us much more than they like Trump. Maybe they feel jealous of him in a monetary sense. Who knows? They're on board with us now. Don't worry, we're going to go after those evil rich people, including ourselves, because most of us make 7 figures a year. Bullcrap. You're not going to tax the rich more. By the way, Trump is now proposing a simplification of regulatory and tax codes in addition to the tax drop. That would be the best thing ever. Now, that would really be, yeah, that would really drain the swamp. A lot of those rich people who right now, they shelter themselves from having to pay a dime, while some small business has to pay the top bracket because they look rich on paper. That'll change. Oh, he'll be very, very popular. It's definitely a populist tax plan. I would have gone even further. I would have dropped it even more, and I would have combined it with like massive and immediate cuts to the bureaucracy, but it's a really, really good first start. This isn't one of those situations where Trump does really mild reform and it's like a half shuffle towards, you know, some actual progress. This is more like a couple of leaps towards the end goal where we need to be. So kudos to him. I strongly support the tax bill. I'm glad. It's going to save me money. Not as much as it's going to save people that are on the lower end, but I mean, I make more money, so I don't need to save quite as much. You know, I'm doing better than somebody who makes $20K a year. They should have more relief. They should, arguably, they shouldn't be paying anything. If you're making under like 30K a year, no, you shouldn't pay a penny. There should be no payroll tax for you. There shouldn't be any employee has to contribute into this and that fucking fund, and here's Social Security, and that should be, Social Security shouldn't even be mandatory. No, it should be voluntary. Basically, hey, you pay in, you grab it back out. You don't pay in, you don't pay out. And then people who are above a certain threshold, part of their taxes is diverted into that collective fund to subsidize it. Easy peasy. You know, if someone's making $1 million a year and they care if you're taking $10 from them a year, that's a little bit on the greedy side. You know, not to deviate from minarchism here too much, but come on, you gotta have a little, I know, it's not the same as charity because that's voluntary and makes you feel good. But then there are people who simply aren't charitable. And I know the whole, you know, hands out of my purse thing. Oh, okay, I understand. But we have to be a little bit pragmatic. We can't have people like starving in the streets. I don't think, after a while, I think even the rich would really, really hate it. Because there'd be like street urchins. Every time they walk down the street, some kid would be saying, please, sir, can I have some more? And it'd be miserable. It'd be like Ebenezer Scrooge times. Come on. We can't have that. We have to have a little bit of generosity as a society. It's just that the government's not generous. Most of that money that it takes for welfare for the poor, no, it diverts it to some other bullshit, or it goes and bombs poor people in some other country with that money. That's the problem. The problem isn't taxation, the problem is stupid taxation. Too much taxation spent on stupid things. There's your problem. If Trump can reform this even mildly, it'll be almost heroic. Because nobody else has made a concerted effort to do that since Ronald Reagan. And even Ronald Reagan never accomplished like this level of it. Hell, it's Trump's first time reforming anything in a monetary sense, and he's knocking it out of the park. This is great for Donald Trump. His approval will rise. You watch. I had somebody yesterday, I said, oh, I predict Trump will, you know, win in 2020. The tax plan will probably cripple the Democrats' ability to go up against him. Not certain, but it increases the likelihood well above 50% of him being reelected. And somebody I think it was a blue check mark user, so, look at, maybe problems there. It was like, oh, this tweet won't age well. And I'm like, oh, people used to tell me that when I was predicting Trump would win around the time of the Nevada caucus, which I did. I said, oh, yeah, Trump's definitely got the advantage. He was probably, by Nevada, it was clear he was probably going to become the nominee of the Republicans. Hell, some of them waited until Indiana before they saw the light. And then, of course, once he became the presumptive nominee, it was like, well, he's probably going to beat Clinton, who will be the nominee for the Democrats. You think she can energize a crowd? Wait till you see what Trump has in store for you. And that's, of course, what happened. That would be my tentative prediction. This increases Trump's popularity, buoys him up. It also takes some of the heat off him for, everything else that goes on because, hey, when people have more money, when they feel more confident, yeah, they're naturally, they're going to give Trump the credit. Trump's name is all over this, just like the ACA. Obama eventually, when it was popular, he was like, oh, I like the term Obamacare. He wanted to wait to see whether it'd be popular among at least the Democratic lay people before he did that. He slapped his name all over it. Trump is going to slap his name and his dick all over this tax bill, and he's not going to let you forget that he was the chief architect of it if it works well. Now, if it falls through, if we have a recession, of course, he'll stop talking about that, and he'll say, okay, we need to try something else. I don't think that happens, though. When I see that Krugman, again, who is almost invariably wrong because he's so politically biased and can't see straight, when I see that he's predicting massive economic downturn, this will harm jobs, this will hurt the poor, I assume the opposite. I assume, hey, the poor are going to be helped. Jobs will start to filter back in. It's not going to be like a massive recovery, but that's not what he needs. He needs flyover state and Rust Belt, sort of small town America to recover at least mildly. Because they didn't even get a mild recovery under Obama. That's all they need. They need a little bit more confidence and a little bit more money to be able to begin rebuilding their lives. It doesn't have to be overnight. They're still going to reward him with the presidency. That's about all. Peace out.